To the vast majority of people who visit the country, Greece is a holidaymaker's paradise. There are numerous sandy beaches and quiet fishing villages along its 15,000-kilometer coastline. It's a land of sleepy towns and shady tavernas. The mainland and the hundreds of Greek islands are littered with reminders of the country's long and varied history. What remains of the ancient Greeks' magnificent temples built to honor their gods attracts large numbers of visitors every year. But what today's tourist seldom sees is the surprising variety of wildlife that lives within the Garden of the Gods. Despite its small size, only half that of the British Isles, Greece possesses a wide range of habitats and wildlife. The forests of Rhodope cloak the remote mountainous areas to the north of the country along the Bulgarian border. Now protected, this is one of the few remaining areas of natural virgin forest in Western Europe. Spruce has taken over in previously felled areas. Most of the original forest is comprised of beech and pine trees. Within its leafy shade, a whole community of wildlife has remained undisturbed for centuries, assisting in the continuous cycle of decay and renewal. Wood ants help to break down dead trees. They also clear up any animal remains on the forest floor. Their nest, built of tiny twigs and leaves, can stand a few meters high. Within the colony, as many as 1 million ants can be busy building, hunting, and serving the solitary queen. A longhorn beetle. Its larvae bore their way through the wood, feeding on the decaying timber. Millipedes feed on dead leaves and other plant material. In the process, they help produce large amounts of rich, fertile compost. There's a whole variety of insect life, each species playing its part in the continuous cycle of growth and decay. And where there are plenty of insects, predators, like this greater spotted woodpecker, aren't very far away. The boulder-strewn rivers that have cut their way through the forest are the home of another insect-eating bird. The dipper is widespread throughout Europe. It gets its name from its constant bobbing motion. Caddisflies, stoneflies and other insect larvae are taken above and below the water's surface. Further downstream, soil and nutrients washed out of the forest become trapped. Where they build up, fertile, sunny clearings are formed, rich in plant life. The flowers attract large numbers of butterflies, like this fritillary, probing a thistle flower with its long, coiled tongue. A brimstone sips at the nectar, and a marbled white shares its bloom with a bee searching for pollen. The hummingbird hawk moth is a day-flying species that hovers, hummingbird fashion, as it feeds on the flowers. Some of the Rhodope forest beech trees are centuries old, with girths measuring up to 14 meters. They have borne witness to countless generations of insects, eating and being eaten, in life's intricate web. Lower down, towards the coast, as the ground levels out, large reed-fringed pools form. They're the ideal habitat of the reed warbler. A grass snake hunts for the marsh frogs that abound amongst the floating vegetation. The snake feeds almost entirely on amphibians, so does not present a threat to the warbler. Brightly colored damselflies, smaller versions of their cousins, the dragonflies, decorate the reed beds. Each male has its own territory that it defends against other males and dances within to attract a mate. Its body's bright metallic sheen and the large blue spots on each of the wings helps the male damselfly to be seen by the comparatively drab female. This one's mating flight has proved successful. Bush crickets feed on the reeds and grasses around the pools. Crickets, frogs, and even the grass snake are all included in the diet of the little egrets that nest in large colonies. This species was virtually wiped out in many parts of its range, a victim of the demand earlier this century for its decorative plumes. Import restrictions and a change in fashion heralded an end to the slaughter. The grey heron, a close relative of the egret, is also common in the region. A sand cliff on the plains beneath the forest is home to a variety of wildlife. A brightly coloured roller uses the sandy outcrop as a vantage point from which to look out for insect prey. A suslik, or European ground squirrel, uses the cliff face as a lookout for danger. These gregarious animals are constantly on the alert for the warning cries of their sentries. Should a bird of prey appear overhead, they'll take refuge in their underground maze of tunnels. A huge ancient plane tree stands alone amid the searing heat of the open fields. The forest, now confined to the mountains, once covered the whole of this part of Greece. Among its branches, grey herons have nested for decades. They sit with their mouths agape as they pant to try to keep cool. Within the heronry, chicks of all ages await the return of their parents, bringing the next meal. Fully fledged chicks can be distinguished from the adult birds by their shorter crests and the grey coloration along the sides of their necks. These young are almost 2 months old and already match the adults in height, about a metre. They're now big enough to fly and can leave the colony to join their parents on fishing trips to the nearby lake. The lake is rich in fish and invertebrates and attracts large numbers of both herons and egrets. Both adults and immature birds return to the colony. The young birds return to nest, the older ones to feed their hungry chicks. Water is as essential as food in midsummer. Food for the older chicks is often simply dropped into the nest, leaving the chicks to fight over it amongst themselves. Of the 4 young birds in this nest, 3 will probably die within the first year of life. Many will fall victim to hunters and irate fishermen. The survivor, though, may live for as long as 25 years. As long as the tree still stands, the heron will continue to nest here each year. The wetlands and waterways along the Aegean shores of northern Greece are an important stopping-off point for birds like these swallows as they migrate from northern Europe to Africa. Many of the smaller channels become overgrown and clogged up, providing an ideal place for some of the permanent inhabitants to nest and rear their young. The familiar moorhen takes its chicks foraging amid a dense carpet of duckweed. A kingfisher, known to the ancient Greeks as the halcyon bird, watches for movement below. Coots walk over the water's surface on the dense vegetation, searching for insects and other morsels. And where there is water, the heron won't be very far away. Just inland, the rich waters of Lake Kolonia also attract large numbers of visitors, including the white stork. These great whites are one of two species of pelicans that come to fish in the lake. They belong to an ancient family that are known to have been in existence some 40 million years ago. They're deceptively large birds, weighing about 12 kilograms and possessing a wingspan of almost 3 meters. The gular pouch under its enormous bill is used for catching rather than storing the fish that form its diet. It also comes in handy when the pelican needs to keep cool. The shelduck is a resident at the lake. The large red knob at the base of the bill shows this to be a male. Although highly gregarious during autumn and winter, the male shelduck becomes more aggressive during the breeding season and vigorously drives off rival males. The salt plains mudflats at the mouth of the rivers Nestos and Evros are also a rich hunting ground for birds such as the tern. The avocet's long, thin, upturned beak is designed to sweep over the surface of the submerged mud. Food, in the form of small crustaceans and other invertebrates, is located by touch using the partly open bill. Across the estuary, another species of bird is busy feeding. It has an even stranger looking and more highly adapted bill that's used for sieving food from the water. These great flamingos breed around the Black Sea area, but come to Greece to overwinter. The Aegean Sea, to the south, is littered with hundreds of islands. Many are uninhabited, and in the past have seldom been visited by man. It's this isolation that has preserved much of their wildlife. Sun-loving reptiles, like this Earhart's lizard, are ideally suited to these hot, dry islands. This one's looking for scraps of meat and flies on a fresh bird carcass. The bird fell victim to one of the Mediterranean's rarest birds of prey. Eleonora's falcon, with its long wings, looks like a large, long-tailed hobby. Because of its preference for breeding on the more remote islands around the Mediterranean, the falcon was one of the last European species to be discovered. This young bird, recently fledged, will soon begin to fly with the speed and precision of its parents. Even the smallest islands, scarcely bigger than a football stadium, can support a surprisingly high population of lizards. Despite its small size, its head and body no bigger than a man's finger, Earhart's lizard is an active hunter. During the late spring and early summer, the brightly colored males defend what little territory they have against their rivals, biting and chasing off younger and weaker males. But here, what looks at first sight to be conflict is in fact courtship. The smaller female is held firmly in the male's jaws while mating takes place. The lizards have few enemies. This is a brown variety of the same species. Cannibalism is common among island races of lizards. It helps reduce competition for food and keeps a healthy population in balance with the environment. Of all the Greek fauna, the pride of place probably belongs to the elusive Mediterranean monk seal. The island of Piperi is one of the few places where the seal is still known to breed. The pups are born in September. At a meter in length, they're about a third the size of their parents. A female calls to her young to come and join her in the water. Throughout its range, the monk seal has been relentlessly hunted, accused of competing with the fishermen for fish and damaging their nets. The inhabitants of the Mediterranean have apparently always known of the presence of seals in the area. Coins dating from 500 BC show a picture of a seal. Homer and Pliny knew and wrote of them, and Aristotle described their anatomy in great detail. Their skins were used for clothing and were believed to be a protection against gout, lightning, and hailstorms. Today, their numbers are but a fraction of what they once were, 2,500 years ago. Although the monk seals were well known to the ancient Greeks, the eerie calls of the pups may well have given rise to the belief that something more sinister inhabited these island caves in the garden of the gods.
We're in Norway next week, where the pine trees are home for all kinds of wildlife, from the wood ants who protect the trees from pests to the crossbills who feed on pine kernels. Partners in Pine is next Monday at the same time.